Hi students, in the last video I talked about the rise of industrialized agriculture in the United States and how that, combined with a more efficient road system, was helping to tie the different parts of the country more closely together. And so now in this video I'm going to talk about other types of transportation systems that contributed to this same trend. I'm going to begin by talking about transportation over water. This was not something that was new in the 19th century. Transportation via water, transportation along rivers, if you remember, was central to French colonization of Canada and the Mississippi Valley. And I talked about the canoes that French fur traders would use to transport their goods down these rivers and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico and to Europe. As we enter the 19th century, we find that instead of canoes, people have moved towards barges as a way to load goods, to transport them down the Mississippi. This was a hugely important part of the economy of the Midwest, the part of America that's growing. These Kentucky, Ohio Valley, Illinois regions, these farmers depend for a lot of their economic success on being able to transport their products down the Mississippi to New Orleans and to colonies in the Caribbean. And the problem with barges was that they could only transport downstream. They didn't have enough power to go back upstream. Typically, they didn't have any power at all. They would just, whoever was guiding the barge would just guide it downstream so it avoided obstacles. Then when it reached its destination at the end of the river, it would be broken down into lumber. And this starts to changes in an important way with the invention of the steamboat. So now you have boats that can both go upriver as well as downriver. And by 1836, there are 750 steamboats that are working the Mississippi River. And this leads to a whole huge river economy. Because goods are not only being shipped, agricultural goods are not only being shipped downriver, but other goods that these parts of the United States are importing are coming upriver. And that's not to say the steamboats didn't have their dangers. We have lots of accounts of steamboats, the engines, the boilers of steamboats exploding, people being killed, but it certainly dramatically expands the range of options that are available. So much so that by 1840, New Orleans is the wealthiest city in the United States because of all the trade that's coming through. Both from the north that's coming downriver and all the goods that are being imported into the Mississippi River Valley. We also see the development of canals, and the canal that I focused on in particular was the Erie Canal. This was a 300-mile long canal that connected Albany and Buffalo. So we're looking at upstate New York if you're looking at this on a map, and basically you're connecting Lake Erie, the northernmost and the easternmost of the Great Lakes, with the Hudson River. And if you're connected to the Hudson River, you're connected to New York City. If you're connected to New York City, you're connected to the Atlantic. And so the Erie Canal, which was finished in 1825, was actually really important in connecting New York and New England with the rest of the United States, because it meant that people living in the Midwest, in the regions that would become Ohio, northern Illinois, Michigan, were now able to transport goods to the Great Lakes and know that from the Great Lakes they could be sent to New York. And so the Erie Canal is partly what makes Chicago a big city, because it becomes an important trading hub. And more importantly, it helps, and remember this is the theme, or kind of the overarching theme of this part of the course, it ties together two parts of the country. It ties together the upper Midwest and New England. And whereas New England could have kind of become this isolated part of the country, where it's just farmers and fishing merchants, now it's being connected with the rest of the United States as well. So Erie Canal, really important in that regard. The last type of transportation that we're going to talk about is transportation via rail. Now, the big boom in rail transportation comes in the middle of the 19th century. I'm going to talk about that probably around week 12 or week 13. But just for the moment, you should know that once railroads start to take off in the United States, they take off in a big way. Why? Because they're not subject to the weather in the way that shipping, especially shipping along canals, is. You don't have to worry about the rails freezing over and you're not able to use them. And two, locomotives are way faster than any other modes of transportation. You could travel, and they're not very fast. So locomotives in the first half of the 19th century in the United States travel around 10 miles an hour. That's 5 times faster than a canal barge, and twice as fast as a steamboat. And so this means that people turn to railroads as a way of connecting the country. Even to the point that the railroad stations along the way become the focus point for the creation of new towns along the railroad. So railroads lead to the creation of new towns, and building of railroads also stimulates the American economy. Just as you had factories that were building plows and reapers, now you have factories that are building or forging the iron for railroads or rail tracks. And the railroads themselves become very powerful corporations. And in the period from 1830 to 1850, the United States is going to lay down 30,000 miles of track. So that just gives you an idea of how this new form of transportation is booming because it is most effective at connecting the different parts of this country together. That'll be it for this video, and I'll be back for one more video for this chapter to talk about the growth of industry.